Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us again, as you so faithfully do every week. This is our weekend edition of Hebrew Word Study, and we are in the book of Matthew, chapter 2, and using a Hebrew rendition that was discovered back in the Middle Ages. And what it does is just gives us some very interesting things to look into to try to just learn a little bit more about what things were like potentially when these events took place. And so, what we're looking at today is, of course, we left off with Jesus being born in Bethlehem, and of course, we talked about the shepherds and the star and the angel, and now we're looking at the wise men. And of course, anybody who's been intrigued by this, if you've done any searching on your own, you're going to find that there are many, many different theories as to who these wise men were. First, the name itself is what we're going to look at today. Why are they called wise men? Who gave them that name? There's many questions, how many were there? Where did they come from? They're following a star from the east. How do you follow a star? There's just so many interesting, and I guess in finality, we don't get good answers from it, but there's a few intriguing things that I want to look at on the names of what these men were called from the Hebrew and just see if we can see where we go. So you're looking at your screen, you're going to see Matthew chapter 2, and the word that's translated here, or that's written is Mekashfim, Mekashfim. And I left it in the work that I'm doing here. I didn't even try to translate it. I just left it in what's called a transliterated, which means I took um, letters from our English alphabet and put them down to create the same sounds as what is created with the Hebrew alphabet. And so, because I don't know how to translate it, because it's everywhere. And so that's what we're going to look at today. Now, what first intrigued me about this Mikashfim is that it is the same spelling as the word that comes from Exodus chapter 22, verse 18, and it says a meshkash beha, which is a female version of it, but basically means the same thing. The letters are the same, just put in a feminine form. They are not permitted to live. They are not supposed to be allowed to live. There's other verses that talk about people who deal in these the occult and in black magic, sorcery, whatever you want to call it. They are not to be allowed to be in the land of Israel, and they are to be put to death. We get that from Exodus. Well, okay, I can understand that, but why are they coming to see Jesus? We don't think of these men as being wicked or being occultic, or we think of them as searching for God, of hearing direction from God, of following after God's call, something birthed in their heart that they felt to look for the star. Then when they saw the star, something motivated them to move and go on an incredibly long journey of um, 3 months to a couple of years are the estimates, depending upon where they came from. So we don't think of them as in the same category as sorcerers. That's why it's interesting that this word here in this copy of the Matthew is the same word that's used in Exodus 22 and 18 for sorcerers. So we have a few other sources to look at. We're going to go to um, a copy called um, George Howard's copy of Matthew. This was also thought to be from an ancient source. This document has a lot more publicity. If you do, any of you who've done any searching looking for Hebrew versions of the book of Matthew, this is what you'll come up with right away. So I have this on the screen. I'm going to highlight here the word that is in the Matthew, or in this version, is Bekokavim, which Kokavim is the word for stars. So here these are men who are, we'll say, in the stars. And so it's translated here on the other side as astrologers. Um, that would make sense based upon this translation. So here you have a document that has Kokavim. The other one is the Mekashfim. We have another one to look at, which is from another similar ancient source. This is uh, manuscript number 131. And when I highlight here, my cursor is going around the Aleph, Shin, Pei, Yod, Mem, Sofit, and this is the Ashafim. So here we have three different Hebrew documents of the same passage of Scripture, each using a different word to describe these men that are coming to see the Christ child. Again, very, very interesting. So hold on to that thought and let's see, do we know where these guys came from? Well, if you go to Google and you do a search, I just put in the words a map of the journey of the wise men. Um, Here's one map that's fairly large, so I thought I'd show that first. It shows that they were in this version of study that they were coming from Babylon and traveling up over the north to come in to Jerusalem. Well, if you just look at what you get when you do the search, you'll see a map here that shows a red line that's more horizontal. You'll see some lines that are vertical. You'll see lines that traverse every which way. And all of them just basically say, we don't know where they came from. We don't know what route they took, but we think they took this route. Some of them reference the trade route from Marco Polo. In fact, one of them even references a, a reading or I should say, a quotation from Marco Polo, feeling that he was on the same route for his silk trade. Those of you that are history buffs know about Marco Polo and the silk trade route, and felt that these men took the same route because there weren't a lot of options back in those days. So again, this is very, very interesting. What I thought to do was go back and I like to compare Bible verses with Bible verses and let the Bible explain itself. So tried to go through and find out where in the Bible does it talk about men who could fit into this category. And the first ones that I came across were, of course, when prior to the Exodus, when Moses was confronting Pharaoh in Egypt, he encountered some men who were at Pharaoh's disposal, and there was this little exchange of, who Moses would do a miracle, and these men that Pharaoh had would replicate it up to a point. And most of you know the story. So we start with that in Exodus chapter 7, verse 11. And here, of course, Moses and Aaron did a miracle, and Pharaoh called these people. What are they called? They're La Hakamim, which is the word Hokam in its root right here, which is where we get the word wisdom from. So that seems to be translated as wise men. Here we get the Mishkafim, which is the same word that we saw in the first version of the Matthew, translated as sorcerers. Down here, we see the word har to maim, and this is translated as magicians. And what the magicians did was a hatehem, and it's called an enchantment. So you have, again, various people here who are being referred to by different names who have presumably different capabilities, who are named for a specific ability that they have. I think the Chokavim, the wise men, we can pretty safely say that these were men of intellectual stature used for consultation, and would be like the, walking encyclopedias, if you would, talking to him, giving him wisdom, giving him direction. So we're not going to investigate the Hokavim, but these other ones, the Mishkafim, the sorcerers, that's the one that is forbidden in Exodus 22. Then we have the Retume, the magicians, and so, how are we going to get to the bottom of this? How are we going to get to find out who these people were? And there are numerous places you can look up in Genesis, you can look up in Exodus. I have many verses listed that, we don't really have time to go through, but I encourage you to do that on your own. Go to a Bible Hub or a Blue Letter Bible, type in magician, sorcerer, wise men, and see what words come up and see how they're used, and see if you can get an understanding of this. One that I think helps us really see it all put together is in Daniel chapter 2, verse 2. And this is in reference to the time when Nebuchadnezzar was the king and Daniel was in the court, and the handwriting appeared on the wall, and the king freaked out, and he called his people. Now, we also have to remember what's important to us here is time has passed from the writing of Exodus to the writing of Daniel, progressing closer to the time when Matthew would be written, that Daniel is closer to Matthew than Matthew is to Exodus and so words change, names of people change. And so here we have almost like the Rosetta Stone here telling us that the king called his Haratufim or Harutuim. You remember that was same one that was used by Pharaoh, so that was called the magician. Here we have the Ashfim, which are called the astrologers. So that's a very similar one to the other Hebrew document I had of Matthew, where you have the Aleph, Shin, Pei as the base. Then it talks about another one. Here are the Mishkafim. So this is the same word that was used in the first Hebrew Matthew document. And then you have another one that's kind of interesting, this group called the Chaldeans. And they are the Kaf Shin Dalet. And who they are, just opening that up, we really don't know what their powers were, what their capabilities are. It just says they came from the land of the Chaldeans. So they might have been fitting in the same category of the um, uh, Hokam men, the men with wisdom, that may have taken the place of that. So here we see these people, three different names or four different names for four different classes of people that seemingly were very commonly found in the king's court, very commonly used by him to help him when he had a problem, to help him in realms that might have been covering the whole gamut of physical, of spiritual, of astrological, of everything that the king would have to deal with. He had these people here. So it still doesn't really help us determine who were these magi or the wise men or the magicians or however you want to call them, of what came. So we've only finished maybe half of the investigation that I've done. We're going to stop here today. Hopefully you'll maybe do a little bit of research on your own. Next time we come back, I'm going to go through a few more verses. I'm going to also go through some of the things that where these words come from and maybe what some of their base meaning could have been when they were first used. And of course, words can take on different meaning as time goes on. Certain cultures can take words that at one time had a very mild and innocent meaning, and they can turn it into something that means totally the opposite and be very negative and very evil meaning. And so we'll take a look at that. We'll take a look at another language that we haven't looked at yet, and that's Aramaic, because we know that Aramaic was the um, common spoken language at the time of Herod, of Jesus, of when these wise men came. Also, these wise men came from the East. What language did they speak there? And how would they have been referred to because they came from another part of the country? And so we'll look at an Aramaic version of the book of Matthew and see what word it has there for these guys, and see if we can gain a little bit more understanding. So I hope you enjoyed this little journey, very different than maybe most Bible studies, but again, it's fascinating to try to get in the same mindset as what people were 2,000, 3,000 years ago, and try to walk in their shoes a little bit. So God bless you. Hope you have a good rest of your weekend. And thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.